These days, cinemas are about more than just movies. They're about experiences. It's winning that Friday night bowling tournament. It's finally beating your brother in laser tag. It's date night with cocktails and a love seat upgrade. Whatever experiences you offer, you need a POS system that can keep up. With over 30 years of development, TAPOS offers a massive feature set, including omni-channel food and ticket sales, embedded CRM, loyalty and membership, custom cloud-based reporting, and third-party integrations with FECs. Learn more at taposapp.com.
There's an associate membership, which is a lower fee, and it's for smaller chains or people who really aren't going to be involved directly with the association on a month-to-month basis.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. Here once again in our daily CinemaCon edition, brought to you by TAPOS. And in today's episode, we are joined by Eric Kohn, the artistic director of Southampton Playhouse, going over all of the presentations in day 3 of CinemaCon. We've also got here my friend and colleague, Chad Kennerk from Box Office Pro, doing the whole panel analysis thing that we often do in the first half. On the second half of the episode, we've got an interview with Mark Mayfield, the chairperson of the ICTA, that's the International Cinema Technology Association. Eric, happy to have you here, man. I've known you for a while.
That's right, we're old homies.
Old homies is something that you said. I'm happy to repeat it.
I'm happy to be back here.
To our listeners, Eric's probably guilty for getting me into this industry. We're old classmates in the master's program over at NYU. The day I met Eric was at an orientation party. You were the only guy that showed up with business cards, Eric.
Always come prepared.
It's a good call. That's when I was like, oh man, I need to step it up. And Eric actually, he's the one that suggested the IndieWire internship back in those days in the early 2010s. That was my first internship covering the cinema industry. Eric was on staff for a long time. How many years were you at IndieWire?
It's about 17 years. 3 different owners. It was a journey.
Yeah.
It was a journey.
I shared 1 or 2 years with you there. That was my beginnings here in film journalism. And now I'm an exhibition, and I somehow dragged you into this business. I'm taking credit for it.
I think I just stumbled one day and found myself running a movie theater. It was just like, whoa, what just happened? But
usually you're born into this, but you decided to jump in, which I commend you for doing. Now, I mentioned at the top, you're the artistic director of the Southampton Playhouse. Can you give us a little bit of background on that theater and your experience so far, 4 months into the exhibition industry?
Totally. So Southampton Playhouse is a historic movie theater. It was built in 1932. It was a single-screen cinema until 1980. It had a little over 1,000 seats, so one of those classic grand movie palaces. And then in the 80s, it became a multiplex. It was a UA Regal for a while, bounced around a couple other kind of ownership situations, and closed in 2020. And it was dormant for a while. So in Southampton, if you wanted to go see a movie theater, you couldn't go to a movie theater in Southampton. If you wanted to see a movie, you had to go somewhere else.
You need to drive.
You had to drive.
That's brutal, yeah.
Yeah. And it was missed, and there were families in the area that were really interested in buying up the property and doing something unique with it. Ultimately, a couple did, and put a lot of time and resources into this state-of-the-art renovation. They built in an IMAX screen. It's the only IMAX in the Hamptons, the only IMAX for a 50-mile radius. We have 3 other screens, one of which has a 35-millimeter projector, and another that is basically a flex space. It can also be an event space. It can be a performance space. And as a nonprofit, we are uniquely situated to be both this destination for mainstream studio releases and a rep house and an educational resource for the community and for the film community at large. So we've got some big plans, but we've also just opened our doors, and on a more modest scale, we're just trying to be an operational movie theater. So it's been a real trial by fire for me. I mean, I've worked, obviously in the media for a long time and studied all these different elements of the global film industry. And then I was a producer for a while, and I worked in development. So the exhibition space was always a little bit on the side of what I was doing, not fully something I had immersed myself in. And doing it now has been amazing because I'm learning so many different sides to things, given that our theater is so many different things to so many different people. So coming to CinemaCon It's just an instant sort of immersion into the many different questions and challenges of this business. And I have to say, I'm really enjoying the ride so far.
It's interesting because exhibition can feel very insular. It's usually a lot of generational either owners or operators in the industry. It seems a little bit removed from the rest of the industry. Am I correct in that assessment? Does it feel foreign to you to an extent, even with all your experience, knowing production, knowing the press side, knowing distribution, going into an industry like this one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it feels foreign per se, but there are a lot of new faces. Mm-hmm. I do think that it is in some ways treated as a separate category of the industry in a way that others are not, that there's a lot more sort of a fluid relationship in other sides of the industry, you know, producers who know the developers, who know the talent and so forth. And a lot of times it seems like the theatrical world is sort of separate from that. It's just like this container where the movies wind up, and I don't believe in that. I know probably you all don't believe in that either, but it
can feel that way.
It feels that way.
I can definitely. I mean, listen. I came through the industry. Obviously, I spent less time at IndieWire, but I came into exhibition the way you did.
Yeah.
Going to film festivals, talking about distribution, talking about acquisitions, and then all of a sudden, I'm in this completely other element, crucially important element of the industry, and you need to relearn some things.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting experience. Of course, it's your first CinemaCon, and I do want to ask you, what are your main takeaways so far as we enter the last final day of CinemaCon 2025?
Well, I have to be honest, as when I was a journalist, I avoided the hell out of this place. Because I wanted to see the movies, not just a bunch of trailers. But I have a totally
But Eric, that's not what this is!
No, I know. But I was a cynical egghead, and from my ivory tower was very dismissive of this convention. And I think in the context of what I was doing at that time, it was because it felt like a lot of marketing and hype and not the substance of the art of cinema, right? But as an exhibitor, I have a very different relationship, which is that I know, realistically speaking, a lot of these studio movies are going to come to our theater. So I need to understand not only what they are, but how the studios are approaching them, what they seem to be enthusiastic about, how audiences here respond to the assets they're putting in front of them, how the media is talking about it, and so forth, so that I can appropriately prepare on the curatorial side to make these movies work. So we have repertory opportunities in our theater to support new releases. We just did a whole video game movie series to build buzz for Minecraft.
Which is going to blow up, by the way. I'm
so stoked.
Like climbing every day this week.
And I think also, you know, when I was a critic and stuff, a lot of times I think people would say the stereotype is, oh, you have like really obscure taste. And I would say I have eclectic taste. I'm excited for a commercial movie that's trying something new. I mean, with Minecraft, I felt a lot of Jared Hess in that movie, and it was great to see that. And we showed Napoleon Dynamite in a way to sort of remind people, you know, there is a lineage of filmmakers who can navigate these, you know, commercial spaces and still bring some of their personality to it. And I felt that to a degree in Minecraft, enough to make it feel like it was something worth celebrating. But anything that we're showing, of course, I'm going to try to do that work to make sure people are excited about it, and also to put it in the context of other great movies.
I think you touched on something that's very accurate in that there is an impression of CinemaCon where folks, maybe in more the B2C press, it seems like a trailer film festival.
Yeah.
But if you're in the industry, you realize, no, this is a convention for me. This is a convention that helps me make a decision on programming, on marketing. This helps me get in touch with people that can solve problems. How can I get a better website? How can I find a better projector for Auditorium 3? I have to reseat. What are my options? Yeah. These are things that are, frankly, and you know this like I do, because we both worked on the press side on the same outlet for a while, those aren't the sort of stories that get ink. Because it's so niche, it's so nuts and bolts from an operation perspective, that writing about projectors tends to be very few people in the press side of the industry.
Yeah, I also think there's this perception of, you know, movie going on a national scale, especially when it comes to studio releases, being something that is exclusively the domain of the AMCs and the Regals. And of course, their presence here is not as significant as the many different independent kind of theaters. So when you think about it through that context, it's a very different kind of a thing. It really is about small businesses and hopefully passionate people who are fighting to make this institutional process for getting movies in the world
And you
relevant.
were recently featured in Cinema United's latest report profiling some independent theaters. I think outside of a museum, I can't name another nonprofit that has an IMAX. I'm sure listeners here will remind me via email, hey, I have a nonprofit IMAX. But it's a rarity that you have that flexibility of, hey, we're a PLF destination. Yes, we're also an independent local nonprofit cinema.
There's only a couple independent theaters with IMAXs in this country. And when you think about the fact that there's almost 2,000 IMAX screens worldwide, it's a pretty small amount. We're very lucky. We have a strong relationship with IMAX. Their CEO lives in our town. And we're developing a way of making the most of that technology to integrate it into how our theater is building its identity. So it's not just like, there's a new movie on IMAX, we're going to be playing it. We also have access to this vast catalog of opportunities from older titles that have been re-released in IMAX 2001, etc., you know, to the educational documentaries that they do, to the short documentaries. When we opened, we played the Blue Angels documentary as well as Captain America. And Blue Angels did great for us, so we keep bringing it back. Because honestly, there are some people who don't want to go to the Marvel movie, but they do want that IMAX experience, or the other way around. We also did great with Led Zeppelin. We keep bringing back Led Zeppelin, which just crossed 10 million nationally. So we're able to sort of experiment with what the IMAX effect means in terms of bringing eclecticism to the theater, and then finding ways for the screens to kind of speak to each other, too. So, you know, programming in Theater 3 might not be the same as the IMAX, but we might have something on the rep side that is relevant to what's in the IMAX.
It's a very unique position that you guys are in, and I encourage all our listeners to check out that Cinema United research report. I believe it's up on Cinema United's website, if I'm not mistaken. Great profile of different local theaters and how they're innovating the movie-going experience. Of course, the Southampton Playhouse being a recent addition in that destination when we talk about our business. But let's hop into here, going over the schedule on the final day of CinemaCon 2025. Starting bright and early, I'll be at the 8 a.m. NAC seminar, NAC EF&B as we're rebranding. I'm going to be checking out everything from the concessions world. Meanwhile, on the ICTA side, my colleague Chad Kennerk, you're going to be checking out a topic that is probably beaten to death at this point, but you have the experts talking about it.
Yeah.
The best AI panel this week, AI in Exhibition, Transforming Technology and Operations. 8 a.m. dueling panels, Boxoffice Pro, covering both of them. We've got, after that, the last little bit of the trade show. It closes at 12:30 p.m. I encourage everyone to go check it out. And if you can go visit our sponsors, TAPOS, which is a product by Jack Rowe, Barco, and our friends at Ice Theaters, you get extra points. Thank you for doing that. And then closing up the rest of the day, we've got the Paramount Pictures presentation at 10 a.m., an industry luncheon with a number of filmmakers speaking in a roundtable at 12:15. The 2:30 p.m. Walt Disney presentation is a must attend. You can't miss it. That's why they put it on Thursday afternoon. And then we close out the evening with the Big Screen Achievement Awards at 7:30 p.m. That's our schedule for the final day of CinemaCon. And now let's move into our analysis section as we go over all of the studio presentations today. Of course, it's Wednesday as we record this. We're recording this between the Universal and Amazon MGM presentations. So you will hear us speak about Angel Studios and Universal Focus. And let's just take it away. I wasn't there for the Angel Studios presentation, unfortunately, but a huge shout out to them. They are on the cover of our current print issue. We're the King of Kings. Eric, Chad, you guys were both there. Chad, let me start with you. What was the biggest highlight of this Angel Studios presentation at CinemaCon?
I think the biggest highlight for me was Zero AD. We've talked before about the content that Angel Studios is putting out, and it's all great, but we haven't necessarily seen that Sound of Freedom type film, and I feel like this is one that could potentially fill that. It's a Christmas release. It's a historical, biblical epic. Eric, what did you think of the footage that they showed?
I mean, the Zero AD trailer, it felt like a serious disaster movie.
Yeah.
You know? Like, they are putting a lot of resources behind this thing. Yeah. I mean, the impressive aspect of Angel Studios is that they're going where no faith-based initiative in the entertainment space has gone before, in the sense that they're putting their work in a context that the broader entertainment industry can appreciate. Like,
yeah, they don't just want to be faith-based. They want to cross over beyond that core audience.
Yes.
That core audience is going to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
But they realize that even in branding as faith-based, maybe that's not what the future of growth is for them.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they have this movie Stitch, right? Which was somewhat on my radar, but not really when it was at festivals and stuff. And you watch the trailer, it's like, there's nothing really faith-based about that movie. I mean, you could say, like, the values seem like they could align with a household that has, you know, faith-based values, but it seems that film was actually just acquired because of their Angel Members program lifting it up, which is, from acquisition standpoint, a brilliantly disruptive way to kind of push films into distribution, and probably something we're going to see a lot of knockoffs for. The challenge is that unless you have a really powerful community, like a church-going community, how do you galvanize people around something like that?
I mean, anime, maybe, right?
Maybe.
I'm comparing anime to Jesus, so apologies for that. But
but I like it.
It's
I
a
like where you're
passionate
going
fan
with
base that
that's funny.
is really tuned into something.
Anime,
right?
horror, right? I mean, these are important
there are
avenues.
niches, and we're talking about audience basis, right? Demographics here rather than a faith. But I think you're right in that, yes, you're going to have a base of a demographic set and engaged and following. But if that's all you want, that's small potatoes. And it's clear that Angel Studios has an ambition to be more than that. And that's what stands out for me from their not only presentation this year, but the presence in this industry in the last 2 years. Chad, one of the things that I know you highlighted in our production notes ahead of this episode is that in 2 years, they went from 0 to a top 10 distributor in North America. Right. That's not something to sneeze at.
No.
And on top of it, their social presence has grown exponentially as well.
Yeah, well, they had a great graphic at the presentation about the Angel Guild and how in October of 2023, they were at 31,000 members, and now they're at over 1 million. So they really have galvanized that audience and brought them in, and it's an opportunity for people to choose content that they want to see on the big screen.
Yeah, it's finding the demand and then addressing it through acquisitions or production, which seems like a simple thing, but Eric, how long have we been talking about a model like this?
No, it's what I mean. I've been seeing so many like DIY distribution type approaches, and we're going to catalyze this or that, or it's going to be like one of these like on-demand type of situations, like where this city wants a movie and that city wants a movie, and we're going to go around. You see some great breakthroughs, like hundreds of beavers making $1 million,
like that.
But they spent like a year and a half on the road, if not longer. Like
you have to put the elbow grease in there,
Right? I mean, it's a trade-off, So I think that this kind of disruption is really great to see. Also, going back to a point that I've been making a lot this week, I think that theaters need to be armed with the right tools to succeed. Now that I'm with one, I want to know how distributors can be partners in reaching the communities that we need to get. Because if we're going to be playing your movie, we don't want to be playing it to an empty house, and presumably the distributor doesn't either.
Yeah.
When I was a producer on a couple movies that were self-distributed and I was on the phone with theater owners, I would say, can you get me a crowd? And based on that reaction, I would make a decision about whether or not my movie should be in that theater. And now I want to know from a distributor, can you help me find the crowds in my community, given that we're still building our audience? So knowing there is a distributor who could say, sure, I know how to get to the churches. I mean, setting aside whether or not they are exclusively faith-based, they understand how to get to an audience that has been neglected by this space for a long time.
I completely agree. And they've got an animated film. Actually, the film that's on the cover of our print issue this month, King of Kings, opening next weekend on April 11th. Chad, what did we find out about this title from the presentation?
They showed the trailer that I think has already been out there, right? There wasn't any new footage.
No, there wasn't any new footage. I mean, look, the movie's opening in a week.
Yeah.
It's in high demand because of Easter.
Yeah.
Right? It's a really smart play, but it's also got a really, really impressive voice cast. Yeah. Oscar Isaac at the top of it. Kenneth Branagh. I mean, it's pretty wild. Uma Thurman. Yeah. So, I mean, in that sense, I'm curious to see how much of that talent supports the release of the film, but if they come out then you're really talking about, I mean, it could be any studio's animated title. It could really have commercial legs.
One of the things that jumped out at the presentation is they just this week talked about if you are an adult and you're buying a ticket, they're making children's tickets free.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Man, that's the reason why they succeed.
Yeah.
Because they understand the topics that really carry weight with audiences in something like this. And the fact that exhibition doesn't have to go to them and ask, the fact that they say, hey, we know our audience, this is going to help both of us in doing this. I love a concept like that. And of course, I think they have another animated title, if I'm not mistaken, in November of this year. I think it's David. I'm not sure if there was anything from that.
They didn't really touch on David.
Okay.
They did cover 5 films in the 2025 theatrical slate. So we've got King of Kings, The Last Rodeo, Truth and Treason, Sketch, and Zero AD.
And the trailer for Sketch was awesome because it made it look like it's kind of a horror. It's sort of cut like a horror movie.
Yeah, yes,
but it's not really a horror movie.
Yeah.
So it's like they're just trying. It's not rated R or anything like it, you know.
Right,
But it's like they put it in a way where that like certain parents might be like, oh, I could be down with this along with my kid. You know?
Right.
It's like the Sesame Street playbook or something, but in genre mode.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And listen, The Last Rodeo, in Mexico, I come from a family that's very big into rodeo. We have a rodeo rink in the family ranch, and we've just been surviving off of 8 seconds for, I think, 40 years now. So to have another rodeo movie out there, I know at least my relatives in Mexico are going to be very happy to get that, available to them in the coming months. Now let's move over to Universal because they had a big presentation today. We not only saw a screening of How to Train Your Dragon here at CinemaCon, I believe you had to sign an NDA before you went in there, Eric?
Nobody made me sign Jack.
All right, so what did you think of the movie?
Yeah, I saw there was a slide that was like, this movie's not really finished yet, so, no reviews or whatever. But
Your film critic days, we're not asking you to file by midnight.
But also,
tonight.
I hear you. One thing I find hilarious about that process, sorry to the studios, because I know everybody's working hard to contain information, and it's a tough business to, like, keep everybody happy, but, like, there's lots of people who wear different hats, so it's like, what even is a review? Like, first reactions, people are going to tweet or whatever, and they're saying it's not quite done, but it's obviously done. They just want the premiere status later, and it's whatever. It's a weird game. I liked
the
it.
game.
There's
interest in that game.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're gonna play the movie. I'm excited to play it on our IMAX. It was great. It was lots of fun. It's the same movie, live action, plus a lot of other adjustments, right? But there are many similarities. And in this particular case, I thought that worked in its favor because so much of that film is about world building and it's about speed, these like aerial stunt kind of things happening, but with CGI. And I was thinking about it also when we saw the Jurassic World Rebirth stuff. When Jurassic Park came out, CGI was like when silence went to sound or something like that. It was like, you could really wow people. It's like, oh wow, the dinosaurs don't look silly. They look scary. And I'm borrowing this description from David Koepp, who did a great intro for us on Black Bag and also wrote this new Jurassic World movie, his first since the original. And he was saying that, and that was a big challenge. Now it's like, okay, the CGI is really good, but what else you got?
Yeah,
and I think that's sort of interesting to me. Like, it's not about, even with Avatar, it's not about how great. I was about to
bring that up.
Right?
I'm at the point, I wasn't into the Avatar sequel.
Yeah.
Just because I was in the back for the first one because I hadn't seen something like that before. By the time you get Avatar 2, The Way of Water, I'm like, okay, I need something a little bit more. The wow factor is there for the first 20 minutes. This is 2 hours plus.
So this you would think would be a knock against doing an animated movie as live action, right? Because the idea is like, okay, so we get it. You can make the animated movie look live action. But I think what works really well on this one is it's a very good, faithful realization of a very good movie, and the aerial stuff and the action in general is really well executed. So I was not surprised that they announced the sequel is like already dated and all that stuff.
Well, that's another thing we have to bring up. How to Train Your Dragon Part 2 is announced for June 11th, 2027. They're that confident. And this is another part of the presentation that we have to highlight, because in our annual preview episode on this podcast, June 13 had two family titles head-to-head cannibalizing each other. You had Elio from Disney, Pixar, and you had this one. And we said it, we called it, one of them's going to move, and it was Pixar. And listen, 10 years ago, Pixar moving from that date is not something you'd see. This shows you the power and the potential that How to Train Your Dragon has in that summer spot, taking a release date that Disney has owned for many, many years, and then on top of it saying, by the way, we're taking that same release date 2 years from now. Thank you very much. It's a statement of intent from Universal.
But you actually should note, there's a theme park opening.
That's what Chad brought up in our preview episode.
So a big
reason for that was, listen, Disney doesn't have an Elio theme park experience coming out. Universal does. And they ended up taking the spot, which makes sense. Let's move on here chronologically in release date order. We also got an early look at Megan 2.0. I did not watch the original Megan. I have to be upfront with you guys. But
you kind of know what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone under the age of 25 did.
Yeah.
I'm not under the age of 25, even though I might look it, but I'm not. So what I saw from the footage that was presented to us here at CinemaCon, this is full camp, right? They're not. Am I wrong about this? They're going.
Well,
there's
footage,
a line
I'll
here.
tell you, I mean, the movie is, this is a hilarious franchise because it's just like Chucky, but like with a woman essentially, right? Who's a robot. It's just essentially what Chucky becomes over the course of that franchise. But like, it's a killer robot, right? And now she's like helping them kill another killer robot. And it looked more like an action movie.
Yeah, it looked
hold on. There were very few lines of dialogue in the footage we saw, and I wrote this down in my notes. The robot came back, and Allison Williams says, "I thought we deleted it. Apparently we didn't." That's all you need. No 3-minute scene explaining it. Just 2 lines of dialogue. I thought it was that. It isn't. All right, let's move on. Thank you for Velveeta exposition. Thank you very much. Let's go on with the action set pieces.
Digital is forever.
Yeah, that's fine. There we go. It's how many times have we thought we deleted something from the internet, and apparently we didn't. This is going to do well. It has to. I mean, Eric, what type of audience do you have at the Southampton Playhouse?
Well, it's a great question because we are in the process of figuring that out.
Right.
A few weeks in, I think that our audience is not exactly what the national box office trends will tell you. We did fine with Snow White. We are doing really well with Black Bag. That one continuously grew in terms of its awareness over the course of a few weeks. So we know that there is an audience that wants sophisticated cinema. We know there's a repertory audience, which for me personally is very exciting, that people will turn out for things like we're showing Knights of Cabiria because we showed Anora, and it's a film that inspired Anora, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. We showed pre-code 1932 films, and those did well for us. So we know there's those kinds of audiences, and we know that there's audiences in general for, whatever the big commercial movie of the moment might be. It's a big bucket. But in terms of genre, I think we have to unlock where those audiences are hiding because they haven't been activated yet. Because I talk to people who love horror, but this theater hasn't really shown horror yet. So when we bring Sinners up, you get a chance to start to tease that out a little bit because Sinners is a genre movie. It's a very unique kind of genre movie, but it is a film that we can make available to people in that context. We're also showing, because Ryan Coogler told me that it was this film inspired Sinners to a degree, we're showing The Faculty, which is an awesome movie.
Modern classic. I love The Faculty.
I was very excited when he cited that, and I was like, well, we have to show it with his introduction. And we're also showing The Fog, which is another movie that has a similar sort of conceit to Sinners. So our theater is located on Hill Street in Southampton, so our series is called Horror on Hill Street. So I'm working to get the horror fans out, and one of the reasons why is because I think that horror is one of the only avenues in our culture where you can still be sort of transgressive and people are open to it. So if I can get the horror fans, then I can get other kinds of audiences.
Oh, I mean, historically, the best way to get social messaging out there without hammering it home or being too obvious or upfront or modeling is through horror.
Yeah, it's a John Carpenter touch, right?
It really,
but
really
it's
is,
not.
yeah.
It's not just about substance. It's about artistry. You know, I think it's really interesting. This is the point I would be making if I was here for, you know, in my IndieWire days. I would be thinking about the fact that the Cannes Film Festival is going to put its lineup out April 10th. And that feels like a different universe from here, right? But I am so excited. I love that. You know, we got a little teaser in the Universal presentation
of the focus
of the focus stuff, right? Like Phoenician Scheme from Wes Anderson and the Yorgos Lanthimos movie. These are probably films going to Cannes, right?
Yeah.
And I live for that stuff, you know? Like, I'm an auteurist at heart, and I live for international cinema, and I don't like alienating people when I get excited by it. I never have. I've always thought about how do I Trojan horse it in. And so with our theater, I want to find these different kinds of access points where it's like you could step in here feeling like all you know is Marvel movies or Jason Statham or whatever, and I don't want to be dismissive of that. I think those are really valid ways to enjoy the movie-going experience. But if you're interested in expanding your boundaries, I want to create those avenues as well.
Audience development is what you're doing. And that's so important
really
because the audience that you have in January 2025, if you start building it, might be very different than what you have in May 2027.
Yeah.
And I love that you're addressing this because this is active programming. And what I mean by that is an exhibition, what I call passive programming is Disney, mid-June, press play.
Yeah.
Let's put those assets up on Instagram and forget about it. But active programming is how can we get people out here? Maybe they don't come out here this year, but maybe next year we develop an audience. And that's something that the art house sector has done perfectly well.
Right.
Nonprofit cinemas have the expertise that I think circuits could really learn from.
You know, honestly, if I could kill the word art house tomorrow, I would. Because there's no reason why we have to...
It sounds elitist. It
sounds
alienating.
elitist, and it makes the movie sound small or somehow lesser than. It's like, oh, you like the arty things or the non-arty things, right? I mean, Anora was an art film from a director who has these very, you know, quote-unquote obscure tastes in cinema by some kind of mainstream standards. But the film has had this crossover effect, and that's because of the strategy involved in getting it out there. And I think that logic should apply to all kinds of theaters. And I really hope, because I've seen some really great kind of personal stories of independent theaters in small towns, and then I see the marquees and I see the same movie titles, and I really hope that there is a process that we can start working through in this community. And these are my early thoughts from being a 4-month-old exhibitor. And I really hope we can start thinking about how do we have different titles. I want to see something that kind of pushes back on this idea that like the same movies have to play everywhere. Different cities have different audiences and different sensibilities. If you can cultivate an audience for a director in Ohio who's from Ohio, and that person comes up with your community, then you can own that. And that can be something that can have an effect for, you know, a generation or two. Yeah. And that's sort of the way that I'm thinking about what can we do in our community. Because we're a nonprofit, we want to educate people. We want to bring production to the East End of Long Island. And then maybe a movie that gets made in our community is something that we can take ownership of when it comes out. And yeah, a bit of a long-winded way to say I think that we need to figure out different routes for getting a range of movies into theaters, no matter what their audiences are.
And I can tell you right now, it's easier for you that today than it was for many exhibitors even 3-4 years ago, because of virtual print fees that came as a result of the digital transition into digital projection really hampered that flexibility in programming. And I think this is an example of the next stage in exhibition. We don't have the shackles of the VPFs limiting what we can program. And we're in a position right now where we can get creative. And we got to this part of the conversation through talking about something like Megan 2.0, right? So it's something that is said in the same sentence. Yes, you can have Megan 2.0, but you can also develop an audience for all of these other movies.
Well, and again, it's like I think we found our way to that because I was thinking about how like horror movies can be this pathway to trying things. I used to go to Fantastic Fest all the time. I was there last fall actually because I was an executive producer on a movie that was there. But it reminded me how that's a really cool festival because it's a genre festival and people don't say, oh, I'm going to go see this Spanish movie or the Italian drama or whatever. They're like, I'm going to go see that crazy slasher or that weird zombie thing or whatever. Or the strange kaiju thing that some guy made in his basement, and they're not talking about language or nationality or whatever. Like, it's this sort of leveling effect.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that needs to be learned from that.
And I'm excited to see how this next generation of exhibitors and programmers can push that conversation forward. And like we've been saying, it's not something that you have to do while abandoning major studio releases.
Right.
It's not an either-or conversation. You can have both. In fact, it's probably the only effective way to doing it is by using a major studio title as a bridge to something else. So let's talk about some of these other major Universal titles hitting screens near you in the coming months. On August 15th, we've got Nobody 2. We saw some trailer footage here. I have to be honest, guys. I was surprised to see this property get a sequel. By the way, Universal, a lot of sequels. If I had some pushback, some criticism here, not enough originals. Exception here is Focus Features, but Universal would have liked to see more originals. I was surprised to see a sequel like this here because the first Nobody title was an early post-pandemic title. And I wonder how much that PVOD data, that streaming data, influenced the decision of Universal to make a theatrical sequel. Because if we go by box office numbers alone, that doesn't tell the story. And this is a thread, I think, for Universal's slate this year. How many of these movies got greenlit based on Peacock data or based on PVOD data? And I know it's the enemy. Sure, okay, that's the easy swipe that we can take. But let's step away from that for 1 second. And let's just look at, this is a studio that has 5 years of PVOD data behind it, influencing its greenlighting capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I think Nobody 2 is one of several movies that is looped into this, hey, box office alone isn't the reason why this got greenlit.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I think that's the observation. That's what I'm trying to say.
Kind of cool. I mean, this footage looked like a lot of fun. Clearly, like there's more demand for Bob Odenkirk to kick a lot of ass and to do that theatrically. I hope that there's still more of that kind of using the at-home data to get people out of the house for the right kinds of things.
That's the right way of using data.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to get in a, let's say, binary conversation. Streaming evil, theatrical good, or vice versa. Right. That's a stupid way, frankly, a stupid way of looking at this industry. If we can tap into streaming data that can lead to greenlighting films, even if it's a sequel that hit theaters, how is that bad? And we're going to be saying this about several movies in the Universal slate, which makes me think that the saving grace of this 17-day window, which I will criticize, it's horse poop. A 17-day window, no one can succeed with it. But the one saving grace I will defend from it is like, hey, there's enough data there that says box office alone isn't going to dictate what gets made.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to just like take streaming to task all the time necessarily. I think it's always a question of, are different industries and cultural forces being respected? Yeah. People get very passionate about the jobs that they have and the histories that they have with different sides of things. So, I understand treating the theatrical space as a sacred thing and needing, windows to be respected and all of that. But I also think, we're getting changing viewing habits all the time, and we need to be responsive to those things all across the board. So, that side of it is, I think, really, really important to be looking at. I am curious who writes the jokes for the Universal presentation, because they all had like silly bits. And there was a pretty savage streaming joke in the Jurassic World presentation where it was Scarlett Johansson said something like, it's like with the dinosaurs, you look around and there's nothing there, but they're there, but you can't see them, just like streaming. And then Mahershala Ali said something like cinema. I thought that was hilarious. We have
ScarJo to thank for Disney not having a PVOD business.
Yeah, it was a big loss.
So there's a lot in film history. David Bordwell is no longer with us. Whoever steps into those shoes, Scarlett Johansson's name is going to be like etched in film history as the woman that killed PVOD, and Exhibition has a lot to thank her for.
Yeah, I think there's been a few of these like big figures like her and Tom Cruise and Christopher Nolan. Now, Sean Baker's sort of inching towards that territory of these like monolithic success stories
absolutely.
who bring the theatrical concept with them as part of their values. And it's a hard pill to swallow if you are a business that is so data-driven.
Mhm.
Because if you're Netflix, I completely understand why, the traditional restrictions of the theatrical model don't totally make sense to you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they don't make sense for a lot of movies. They make a lot of sense for how movies permeate our culture today because there's just such an onslaught of information and you need that kind of delicate curatorial touch to lift things up. And that's what theaters do.
And part of this trend of streaming dictating what gets made for theatrical continues with the September 26th release of Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie. This is an IP that came out of nowhere, developed as a streaming property for Netflix. It's already had 11 seasons on the streamer. And now, thanks to that built-in audience that Universal accomplished through Netflix, we're going to have a theatrical event movie for late fall. Now, it's unfair to ask you guys what you thought of this. Chad, if you have any reactions, please share them. Eric and I both have young daughters, so we'll probably be part of the audience at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe not theatrically, but eventually you and I, Eric, are going to sit through Gabby's Dollhouse, whether we want to or
we'll
not.
See. I mean, I'm fine with that.
I don't think your kid's sitting through Nights of Cabiria. Not in the next 5 years.
But she talks about her buddy Charlie Chaplin all the time. Chaplin shorts are great for young kids, including I have a 3-year-old, and she thinks he's hilarious because the shorts are pretty simple.
Yeah.
They're totally ridiculous. Like a lot of times she'll be like, what is he doing? Like there's like a bit where he's like trying to unfold a chair and it keeps like falling apart on him or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. He's just doing something ridiculous. It doesn't matter. So it's funny. But I'm totally fine with her watching other things. Like, she loves Frozen. She binges Bluey. So I'm sure Gabby's Dollhouse will figure in at some point.
In our rotation at some point.
Yeah, it's just I just need to get a little bit of my own sensibilities in there to balance things out and to stay sane.
Well, let's talk about our own sensibilities a little bit more because on September 19th, we've got, I think this might be the only original title we got from the Universal proper presentation. Focus has original titles, which is great. But from Universal itself, Him, a Blumhouse title produced by Jordan Peele, movie about a college football player that gets injured, and in his comeback, there is some sort of horror angle. We got to see the one sheet here at CinemaCon for the first time, at least. I don't know if it got premiered before.
Bloody football.
And then we also saw some great footage. To me, it seemed like a documentary about the garbage program from the University of Nebraska Cornhuskers. Go Colorado. That's all I have to say about that. But beyond that, I have to tell you guys, this is probably the one Universal movie outside of the Wicked sequel, which we'll let Chad geek out about in a bit. Don't worry, that's coming. But outside of the Wicked sequel, this is what stood out the most from me at this presentation, barring Focus. Because Focus, that's a gimme. I'm always in the bag for Focus. Chad, what did you think of a genre play like this?
As I was watching the trailer, I feel like, why hasn't this movie been made before? Like,
right? It's kind of obvious.
An athlete making a deal with the devil is basically what I took away from watching that. I'm like, oh, that's great. I can't wait to see it.
Because the footage that we saw starts as a sort of traditional, like, sports movie, and I was, like, already rolling my eyes. I'm like, Jordan Peele, come on. But by the second half of that footage that we saw, we're like, okay, yes. This is going to be wacky. This is a genre play. Eric, what did you think of that movie coming out on, when do we have this here? September 19th.
September 19th. I mean, the thing is, like, Jordan Peele is one of the most interesting figures of the last, like, decade in American cinema because he was undervalued as this comic guy making movies. And then, basically reestablished his brand overnight with Get Out. And that fandom that has invested in his pivot is an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with horror before, right? Mm-hmm. This idea of, like, horror, and it creates this lane to be transgressive. So does comedy. And, it feels like this movie kind of blends those sensibilities once again. So it's exciting. Again, as an exhibitor, we got to build an audience for horror.
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like this one has some other things going for it because it's also got the football factor.
Yeah,
That's a very robust.
If it was football alone, that's had a hard time breaking through, not only the box office, but the general culture.
Totally.
Football is something you watch live on television. It's not something you go to a movie theater to enjoy.
Right. So in that sense, maybe it reinvents the appeal of the sports movie, too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of compelling things to say about this. And there's also a weird pipeline brewing of like former sketch comics turned into horror auteurs. We also yesterday saw footage from Zach Kreger's Weapons, which we didn't go too much into detail at the podcast, but man, Weapons looked awesome.
They looked wild. I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was going on, but
I don't know what it's about, but it was creepy, man.
Yeah.
It was great.
Totally.
That's been a theme this week. We've seen some really interesting horror trailers, so this year could be a great year for horror.
It's certainly a great year for trailer editors.
Yeah.
I mean, I started thinking about this. It's like when I go to a film festival and you see, like 20, 30 movies in 2 weeks, you start to realize certain tropes of like how people are telling stories. This week, I've been seeing like the same tropes with trailer edits. Like they all have the same sort of pulsating thing with like a slow build, and then it's quiet, and then it's like a needle drop from the director of title, like you just start, so you close your eyes and you can see the same sort of cadences. It's pretty funny. It's a great business.
Hey, listen, when it works, it works. I'm not going to knock it, right? We just wish it worked more consistently to get moviegoers into theaters. Let's go over another Blumhouse horror title here, scheduled for October 17th, The Black Phone 2. Now, the first Black Phone screened here at CinemaCon a couple years back, and this sequel looks very compelling. Chad, what's your initial reaction from the footage we saw?
Yeah, I liked The Black Phone a lot, and it is a little more, it's horror, but it's a little more in the thriller genre, and I feel like the sequel is, from what we saw today, taking it much more in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Because without giving away spoilers, it's like, how can you have a sequel to this movie?
It seemed like an abduction thriller, the first one.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a bona fide horror movie. Maybe more supernatural elements that I know were there in the original, but I think are going to be accentuated more by what we saw. Eric, any expectations that you have for a title like this on October 17th?
Which movie are we talking about?
Black Phone 2.
Black Phone 2. No, the reason why I had to ask you to remind me is because Black Phone 2 and Five Nights at Freddy's 2 were presentations that happened very close together. And even though
they melded into each other?
Yeah, I'm like trying to
Welcome to CinemaCon, Eric. This happens all the time.
It's like, to your point.
Which The Rock movie is this?
Well, it's like you have a lot of sequels, but then you have a lot of Blumhouse sequels, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they're totally, Black Phone 2 is, I'm excited to watch it. It looked pretty spooky. I think Ethan Hawke is an extraordinary actor, and, I'm always curious to see what attracts him to do certain things, including, investing in a franchise. Mm-hmm. The first movie came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So with this one, I think it's really a question of, can you build on expectations, because they weren't there before. It looked like it had potential, for sure.
Listen, it's positioned for that Halloween corridor. I think that's very interesting in itself. And let's not forget the sort of October we had last year. I think with a title like this in mid-October is as close to a guarantee as it's not going to be as difficult in October in 25 as we had in 24.
Yeah. No, and people liked that last movie, and The Mask did kind of go viral in a way, which is amazing. Like, talk about like a cheap special effect. It's like you couldn't ask for a better opportunity.
Let's talk about virality here, because the final Blumhouse title that we're going to, well, not the final, because one of the final Blumhouse titles that we're going to be talking about in this conversation is the December 5th release of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Yes. Jason Blum showing up in costume, addressing head-on, and I appreciate he did this, the disappointment in the exhibition community that the first Five Nights at Freddy's was day and date on Peacock SVOD. Not even PVOD. If you paid $7 for Peacock with commercials, I think you got this. I might be mistaken on that, but I think that's the case. It wasn't a factor on opening weekend. It was like an $80 million opening weekend. Yeah. Great. Week 2, just right down the toilet. In week 3, where a lot of exhibitors were committed to play it contractually, nothing. Ghost town.
The word of mouth immediately sent people to watch it on streaming.
That's killer, but I'm glad that Universal learned its lesson. And they come out here saying, not only do I have a sequel, but listen, we're pivoting from that strategy that did not work. And that's what I think is important in this Windows conversation that we're having at CinemaCon so much, where 45-day minimum window seems to be a rallying cry for the industry. Yes, let's focus on that uniform messaging, But let's also give credit to the studios when they realize that something wasn't working and they're willing to fix it for something else. And that's what we saw here with the Five Nights at Freddy's sequel. Of course, the last Blumhouse title that we're going to talk about is something coming down further down the schedule. We talked about Megan 2 earlier. There is a more adult-leaning spin-off based on Killer Robots, a title called Soulmate. Is currently scheduled for 2026. I have to tell you, between Soulmate and Megan 2.0, I'm probably more on the Soulmate camp.
Yeah, it looked like a lot more fun for our sensibilities.
Yeah.
Which, not to poo-poo Megan, but I mean, it looked like it had a little bit more going on. Though I will say, because I don't want to spoil it, that there was a movie that opened at the start of this year that has a very similar premise. Yeah. The premise is a spoiler, so I won't say which movie it is, but they must be thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
That movie did pretty well.
No, and if you lean on that to leverage some of your marketing strategy, I think it's going to be good. Chad, from the Blumhouse part of the slate that we saw today from Universal, what stood out for you the most?
Him, definitely, out of the 3 or 4 that we saw.
You mentioned the one original title, and I agree with that. Eric,
I'm
on the horror side, what do you think is the winner here?
From that slate?
Yeah, the Blumhouse batch.
Yeah, it's got to be him. Right? I mean, that's
it's not a coincidence. It's a unanimous decision. The one original title that we saw was the most compelling.
But I have to tell you, I mean, we've seen a lot of horror. I don't think that's a bad thing for the reasons that we've outlined earlier. I've seen a lot of horror in the last few days. Nothing gave me more delight than Final Destination Bloodlines. The insanity of
which
that
is an IP
Goldberg
reboot cool thing.
But it's like so fun and inventive and dude, I had a great time. They showed this like extended clip that was so entertaining. And I love that. I love that there's so much genre stuff going on. I'm also excited for 28 Weeks Later. I'm doing a big zombie series at the theater leading up to that.
I think everyone with a pulse, and without a pulse, to be fair, is excited about 28.
I mean, come on. It's just like I think the horror having a moment now is maybe different from what it was before. Like, people always think horror is having a moment, but right now it seems like it's just having a really positive one. Like, there's just a lot of different innovation going on in how stories are told, and from Jordan Peele to keeping a franchise like Final Destination active after being inactive to a while. People are starting to understand what works about that genre.
I think studios are more amenable to giving original ideas a try in that genre. And I think you can probably get away with social commentary more easily within that genre. This isn't the 3-year span thing. This is a generational, like 80-plus year trend where social commentary is probably best driven working within the conventions of a genre like horror. And I think that's what we're seeing here at CinemaCon. When we see originals, it's usually within this.
Yeah, and by the way, like, horror is like this porous thing, right? Like, we also saw these clips from Yorgos Lanthimos' Bugonia.
Yeah.
Another movie, I don't really know what that movie's about, but it looked pretty twisted and disturbing. But, like, I don't think of Lanthimos movies as horror. I just think of them as Yorgos Lanthimos.
That's true.
So it's more like, it's almost like, I think horror is just like an access point for doing things where you can get a little bit more twisted, a little bit more edgy and bold. Because if it scares you, then it might still work in a trailer.
Well, let's go into the focus part of the presentation because I want to hit Wicked at the end of this chat. Focus had 3 titles that it introduced. Bugonia, scheduled for November 7th from director Yorgos Lanthimos. I thought it was great. I also have no idea what it's about, but to be fair, I never know what any of these Yorgos Lanthimos movies are about.
Even after you see him, right?
Yeah, even that multiple times. Yeah. Chad, what did you think?
I don't need to know anything other than Yorgos Lanthimos, and
that's all you need at this point.
I'm gonna go see
it.
I love his films.
I think it's the same for Wes Anderson. We also got to see some footage from The Phoenician Scheme coming out on May 30th. It was very well received in the press reception area. Yeah. Down with the exhibitors. What did they think about this?
I couldn't really read the room. I think part of the challenge from an exhibitor standpoint is that movie is coming out at the beginning of the summer. It was dated fairly recently, and it's a busy time.
And it's going up against Karate Kid. Yeah. But it's a different demographic.
Different demo.
But it's still 1 week after you've got Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch.
Exactly. And depending on how many screens you have, you have commitments to fulfill and stuff, so it's going to be important for people to want to work that in. But you also can't take for granted a Wes Anderson audience unless you're in New York or LA. And so This trailer was really promising in the sense that it looked fast and fun. There's like a plane crash type of thing that happens, and there's an entertainment value to it. Whereas something like, say, the French Dispatch, right, which I also really enjoyed, but it's like you just gotta like play up Bill Murray or whatever. It's like it doesn't feel like they're grasping for threads to like make it relevant to people.
No. It seems like an easier sell to a wider audience or a crossover audience.
Yeah, it felt a little more Grand Budapest Hotel in terms.
But it's not Fantastic Mr. Fox either.
No,
I mean the thing we do see with Wes Anderson movies is that they tend to start earlier in the year and they build and build and build. So I guess that's the hope with that one.
Yeah.
And final title, I think, here from the Universal Focus slate that is greenlit through the data that they must have from streaming is Downton Abbey, the grand finale, scheduled for September 12th. The sequel is another one of those post-pandemic movies that if you look at box office alone, it's hard to make an assessment because the market just wasn't there when that was scheduled, especially for older audiences. But Universal and Focus didn't give up on it. They have faith in this property. And I don't think we're going to have a Freddy and Jason sort of like reboot for the Downton Abbey folks.
Yeah.
If I'm going to believe them that it's the grand finale. It's not the final reckoning, although it'd be great if they use that as well.
Yeah.
But I do expect audiences to turn out for this. Even if it's a demographic that it's been the slowest to recover, the slowest to come back is the 50-plus age range, at least here domestically.
Yeah, but there must be a younger audience for this stuff too, right? I mean, it exists.
Yeah, I guess.
Because they like the outfits and stuff. I mean, if you look at Letterboxd, I've certainly done my due diligence on that. I mean, there are fans, right? Yeah. Maybe it's their fans because their parents are fans. Or
Have they moved on to Bridgerton? Is my
I don't
question.
know. That's really fascinating.
Like, I don't know if they're still into a show that peaked in 2012.
Right.
And that's the issue that Downton Abbey has. And I think I commend them for saying, we're going to come out with this one, but this is the last one.
Right.
Now, of course, if it makes $200 million worldwide, it's going to be the Grand Finale Part 2 coming out in 2029.
They'll do the Next Generation.
Right, Downton Abbey, the Next Generation.
Kids.
Well, it kind of seemed like the family was saying goodbye to this estate, to this home from what we saw in the trailer.
Yeah, they were certainly walking away.
Maybe there's a new family that's going to move in.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Maybe Eric comes in, renovates it into a 4-screen theater with an IMAX. I don't know, man.
I love it.
Talk to Harmony. There's an idea there. Maybe you can get something going. And we have to close this conversation with the grand finale of the Universal presentation, Wicked for Good, coming out in the same weekend that Wicked came out last year, November 21st. This is the third consecutive CinemaCon where new footage from this property is unveiled. Chad, I know you're a huge Wicked fan, and I always love asking these questions. It seems like you've been very happy with the first two CinemaCons of Wicked footage reveals. How are you feeling this time around?
Great. They had their victory lap. They brought out Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, John Chu, and Mark Platt, and celebrated that victory. And the footage that we saw, it checked as a fan and of the musical and the film. It checked all the boxes, and I'm like, okay, yep, that's it. That's part 2.
It looked great.
We didn't get any.
It looked great.
I don't think there was any hints of the new songs in there.
No, I think it was a big question mark. There's 2 new songs, right?
Yes, they each, Galinda and Elphaba both have a new song that Stephen Schwartz, who wrote the musical, wrote for the film.
That just sounds like let's get the best original song Oscar mission for the sequel.
Well,
that's what it's made for.
Yeah,
it seems like.
I'm sure. But also the musical itself, Act 1 has this huge finale song, Defying Gravity.
Yeah.
Act 2 has some great music, but not necessarily something
how do you
that...
move past Defying Gravity?
Yeah.
By the way, it's totally stuck in my head all over again because of that presentation.
I have to say my toddler knows like 5 words, and those 5 words are prominent in the song Popular. So Popular is a daily part of my life. I like the first Wicked movie. I saw it at the Movie Tavern in Flourtown, Pennsylvania. 3 p.m. screening, Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, and the row ahead of me probably drank all of the margaritas at the Movie Tavern. I mean, they were done by the end of that running time.
But were they singing along the whole
yes.
time? Oh
yes.
God.
I mean,
that was the most hilarious.
Not loudly, but it was, I think the alcohol service maybe slightly influenced this. Because of this anecdote, I have been talking to some F&B executives here at the convention asking like, hey, was it just me or did you guys hit like great sales on alcohol for Wick? And they're like, you have no idea. Like it was like fantastic. That
really
whole week.
good to know. We just got our liquor license.
Well, there you go.
Oh,
I mean, get
yeah,
that
you
Margarita Monday ready for Wicked. Get those
exactly.
off-peak drink specials. I think
Pink
that's
and
going to
green
work out.
cocktails.
Okay.
Big hits.
Good to know.
Big hits. Eric, what was your reaction to Wicked for Good?
I mean, it looked like Wicked, right? I mean, I don't think there were any huge
Well, it is the
surprises.
second half of a musical, right? Like, it's not a new movie.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like it's funny that they said they've presented 3 times at CinemaCon.
Yeah.
You know, because I guess like each time there's a little bit more confidence, and now it's like how much more confidence do you actually need to get, right? Like the audience, the expectations there. I guess from what I can tell, because it's just a continuation of that story, the only real open question is the payoff going to be powerful enough for there not to be some kind of notable drop off? I think about with the last Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Word of mouth was not great.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, it was also following a movie that didn't have great word of mouth, although I really liked the second one that Rian Johnson did. But it did feel like that movie suffered a bit after it came out, even though there was a lot of anticipation. I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but there is a Star Wars-y kind of element to the success of Wicked.
That'll be interesting to sort of see how that develops. I will say this. When we say this is the 3rd consecutive year we see Wicked footage at CinemaCon, that's usually something we say about like a Lionsgate drama that's an original that's still in the can that keeps on getting punted down the road. So it's a very different situation. But crucially, in year 1, Wicked was not a guarantee. Yeah. It was not a guarantee. They had something to prove. Even last year, the second time we got Wicked as part of the CinemaCon presentation, we came in confident. I came in confident, Chad, because of what he told me. You were like, hey, I'm a diehard fan of this, and I like it. Yeah. But it wasn't a guarantee. Right. The difference here is, as Jim Moore, the head of distribution at Universal said in the presentation, is that it's coming with the support of theatrical behind it and the support of audiences behind it. Yeah. And the streaming date right now, it's on Peacock, regular SVOD now after a long window. It's there to continue that marketing push 1 year out to help this debut on November 21st. This is a contender, I think, for one of the biggest films of the year. I think I'm very happy with the way Universal treated something that I would have understood if they were like, hey, we're going to take a victory lap. Here's a title card. See you guys next year. They went above and beyond. And people left that Universal presentation, A, excited, and B, with Defying Gravity stuck in their heads for the next week.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And they pointed out that the Broadway musical, which has been running for over 2 decades, is now at its highest sale point. So to be able to have that interaction between the different ways that this thing lives, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's sort of like the promise of transmedia made real, right? Like that you can have this sort of property that can exist in all these different places and be successful and also good and satisfying, and not just like marketing hype for one thing or the other.
Very few properties get there. Very few properties get there. I think Wicked has that. And that's the difference coming into November 21st this year. Is late November last year, we didn't really know how it was going to play out, really until the pre-sale period told us, oh no, this is going to blow up. Yeah. This year, we have a base of expectations. I don't think that's threatened based on what we saw, Chad.
No, I don't think so. And Universal's marketing campaign for the first film got a lot of people that hadn't seen the musical watching the film and plugged in and ready for the second half. Maybe they've gone out and since seen it on stage.
Right.
But Act 2 does a lot of really different things with that story and flips The Wizard of Oz on its head. So audiences that don't know what's coming up, there's a lot of surprises.
Well, I can't wait. And talking about I can't wait, we got to pack this up and get going, guys. The Amazon MGM presentation starting in 10 minutes. That's going to be part of tomorrow's podcast episode. Coming up next is our colleague Mark Mayfield, the chairperson of the ICTA. A huge thank you to Eric Kohn for joining us. Welcome to CinemaCon.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel very welcome and also put in my place, learning many new things. So.
It's great. You know, the hard lessons come in months like March. So the bumpy road's done. Don't worry, it gets better. All right, he came at a low point.
I'm stoked.
And of course, Chad Kennerk, our colleague here, joining us for the discussion. Mark Mayfield coming up after this break.
ICE Theaters, the ultimate immersive cinema experience, where innovation meets immersion, extending beyond the screen and surrounding you with light, color, and action, deepening every emotion. This is cinema like never before. Discover the future of moviegoing and premium cinema only at ICE Theaters.
And I am joined here today by Mark Mayfield, president of the ICTA, the International Cinema Technology Association, and director of cinema marketing at Meyer Sound. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about you, Rebecca?
I'm well. I'm recording this actually quite a few weeks, quite a bit before CinemaCon. So I feel like the energy level that I personally have is higher than it's going to be when we're at the show. It's always a fun time, but my goodness, it's a crazy couple days.
And it is ramping up very quickly. I can tell you that. The energy. Yeah.
Yeah. First, I wanted to touch on, I know that ICTA is doing something new this year in terms of Monday programming. I don't want to get too specific into the details just because by the time anyone listens to this, it would be too late for them to register, and I don't want to give anyone intense FOMO. But can you give us a little bit of a rundown of that portion of what ICTA has going on at this year's show?
2 years ago, we launched that Fundamentals of Cinema Presentation Technology course. 2 years ago, I can't believe it. And now it's offered online through a partnership with CineTrain. And that was really the fundamentals. It was really geared toward theater staff and non-technical members of the exhibition community. This one is a little different. We're partnering this year with ISDCF, Intersociety Digital Cinema Forum, and the Cinema Foundation to put on a little bit more technical program on Monday. It's essentially a full day program from 9 o'clock to about 2:30 in the afternoon. And it's really going to be more of an interactive type conversation specifically geared towards tech topics. And it's also supported by CinemaCon, I should point out too. They're putting it on the program. It's free of charge and it's open to anybody who's at CinemaCon on Monday.
Okay, great. I mean, I know this is a time when you're seeing a lot of cinemas reinvest in technology, really ramping up that transition to laser and then looking down the line at things like direct view LED. I mean, it's a really exciting time in terms of technology. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing at the show? What consumers and moviegoers are really going to respond well to?
You know, bubbling under the surface, aside from projection technology and sound technology, which has always been there and been a fundamental part of our interests, there's a lot of software technology going on, interconnecting many of the systems that it takes to run a cinema complex. So we're looking at upgrades to that sort of the interconnection of network technologies, but also we'll be exploring one topic about AI in exhibition, which just seems to be pervasive in any industry right now. And that's a different session. That'll be on Thursday morning. ICTA will be sponsoring kind of the traditional Thursday morning session focused on AI in exhibition. So, you know, I'm a sound guy, so of course I'm looking forward to some of the advances in sound and projection, but there's a lot more technology out there affecting the theater that we don't often talk about. So we'll be talking about those things.
Yeah, I mean, the days of paper tickets and looking up showtimes in the newspaper are long gone. I mean, you mentioned CineTrain. They have the technological element of training. There's, tech is POS system, is website management, is ticketing, is integrating all of those things together so that you can use them. I mean, cinema technology is so much more than just the projection and sound, even though obviously we wouldn't have an industry if not for those two.
Yeah, and it's bringing in people with different backgrounds into our industry. So this is one of the reasons ICTA is really focusing on education and training as part of our mission, because there's lots of new technologies and a lot of backgrounds that need to merge to make a cinema operate these days. Every cinema seems to have a director of IT, for example. You didn't hear that 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Except, I mean, you look at maybe some of the smaller chains or even just independent theaters who don't have the resources or the funds, even if you're not the director of IT or you're not, in that tech space, it's still stuff that you need to know about. I mean, have you found people are receptive outside the tech space to, I mean, I know fundamentals of presentation technology, you took it across the trade show circuit, and I know it was always well attended. The one I went to certainly was.
Yeah, we had about 800 or so people see it in person, and now, of course, it's online, so there's many more. But now we're focusing, to the more technical topics, assuming everyone grabs the fundamentals. Smaller chains and larger chains, do you hire your own in-house technician or do you outsource that? There's a lot of really good outsourced technicians that service some of the smaller chains. So it's becoming an issue that everyone has to grapple with, these changing technologies.
You don't have to know how it works. You just have to be able to know how to talk about it and how to say, this is my problem.
Right. And some of that is all new language to theater operators in some cases.
So ICTA obviously has been around for, when did you guys start? It's been
over 50 years. We had our 50-year celebration, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, 50 years. That's wild.
Incredible.
Are you seeing a growth in membership now that, I mean, there is so much more technology in cinema, as we mentioned. Are you seeing more people from maybe the software side of things join the ICTA?
Not so much software, but we have expanded our reach, by necessity. I mean, everyone in our industry has to have an interest in technology or some basic understanding. Mm-hmm. So whereas ICTA used to be really mainly manufacturers and dealers 50 years ago, we've opened it up to any group that really has a stake in cinema technology. So that includes exhibitors, consultants, architects and designers, the media, system integrators, both on the IT side and those who integrate cinema technologies. So it's a much broader range of members that we're attracting now, and it's getting a lot of good reception beyond the traditional manufacturers and dealers social club, which it used to be, no longer.
For that side of things, being a member of ICTA is obviously a no-brainer. Can you get into maybe what ICTA does throughout the year, both at shows or online, that is maybe catered to some people from the other sides of the industry? What's available to someone who might be looking at joining ICTA but not sure what they'd get out of it?
We're hoping to drive more people to our website. We're expanding our education, content on our website, which has always been there, but as we develop more of it, it's going on the website so people can see kind of what we're all about. We just had our Los Angeles seminar, unfortunately, had to go online in January because of the tragic wildfire situation. But all of that content went online so people can see what we talk about. And I think that's going to attract a whole new layer of interest around the world. Also, we are expanding our presence around the world. We've done a good job at Cine Europe presenting an ICTA seminar for the past couple of years. We did a program at Cine Asia, and we hope to be expanding that and kind of expanding the global reach of this organization too. So I have nothing but, positive things to say about our future.
Great. And that's International Cinema Technology Association.com or ICTA-web.com.
Correct.
Either of those works.
Correct. Thank you for mentioning that.
Because the first one's a long URL there. So ICTA-web will work just as well. Gaining more of that global perspective being at these shows. What are you seeing on the show circuit in terms of the technology that excites you? I feel like we're seeing so many things hit like Cine Asia. Like I can't wait to see certain things that I see happening there technologically, and they're not in North America yet. What are you impressed by?
Well, the discussion of PLF or premium large format or just premium format, as I like to call it, is everywhere. It's growing a little faster in some parts of the world than other. Of course, the attention towards direct-view LED screens is out there. And in fact, we'll be talking about that again on Monday of CinemaCon at the Cinema Systems Summit. I'm curious as a sound guy about the possibility of acoustically transparent direct-view LED screens. There are rumors out there that that's coming, and I've not seen it. I don't know what it looks like because you need to have a fairly tight pixel pitch to get a picture to look well, but you need a wide pixel pitch to have the sound come through. So if there's a solution, I am very much looking forward to seeing that. There's some rumors out there about other projector manufacturers coming in, as well as at least one new loudspeaker technology that I won't dwell on because I'm wearing my ICTA hat today. But yeah, some things are gradually coming back into the technology field.
So let's assume maybe I don't know what that is exactly. Yeah. Can you give me the basic? Is that the speakers are behind the screen, just coming forward?
That's the hope. Yeah. As you probably know right now, the solid LED screens require you to put the loudspeakers either above, to the sides, or below, or my company has a solution that reflects the sound off the screen back out into the audience. Honestly, most people will admit none of them are ideal. None of them, really create the localization effect as effectively as putting the 3 or 5 speakers behind the screen so that the sound appears to be coming from where the picture actually is. If we could possibly have a acoustically transparent direct view LED screen, then the speakers could go back to where they belong behind the screen. But there are hurdles to doing that as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, the sound has gotten so amazing that I feel like if you do have direct view LED with any of those kind of subpar, non-ideal sound solutions, people are going to notice. Whereas maybe before, when you've had the best, you notice when something's not necessarily right.
Yeah, the human perception system, you can localize sound to image fairly accurately. I mean, there's been a few studies that say you really can't, but the ones that I've covered and certain people localize very quickly. I mean, it's a human evolutionary thing. You hear a sound, you can know where it is without even looking toward the direction of it. And that's important, I think, to pictures. You don't want to be distracted by the sound coming from a place that's different from the picture.
Do you have types of membership? What should someone do aside from go to the website, ACTA-web, to find out if they'd like to join? What are the benefits? Sure. Give me the pitch for all these maybe newer people in the non-audiovisual space.
Yeah, sure. There are 3 levels of membership. There's the active membership, which the majority of our members are active members. That has full voting rights onto certain things that come up during our membership meetings. You can be on the board of directors or even in the executive team. There's an associate membership, which is a lower fee, and it's for smaller chains or people who really aren't going to be involved directly with the association on a month-to-month basis. Mm-hmm. Then there's a sustaining membership. There's about, 20 or so sustaining members who pay a little bit more, but you get a little bit more exposure to the industry and promotion for your company at our various events and online and brochures, and anything that we do actually promotes the sustaining members. The benefits, honestly, besides the networking and the education, there's financial benefits. The membership fee is not that high, and it'll pay for itself with discounts to the various trade shows that offer ICTA members discounts. And it offers discounts to some of our events, too. So it's really something that everybody should look into to support their business.
And even the associate members, the collaboration with CineTrain, the fundamentals of cinema technology, all 3 of the tiers have access to that on your website.
That's correct. Yeah, and you can apply for any of those online on the membership page, and you can also apply to any of the events that we sponsor on our website as well.
I'm looking forward to the next LA seminar series. I know it was just really a case of really bad timing this year, but I'm really excited to see what you guys have going on at CinemaCon.
Yeah, and actually, because we weren't able to do the social networking part of our mission at the LA seminar this year, we're going to kind of continue that at CinemaCon. On Tuesday night, we have our usual ICTA cocktail reception, which is free to all members, but there will be a charge if you're not a member, because this year it's a little different. Yes, we're going to have the networking opportunities, but we're moving our awards ceremony over to that reception. The awards ceremony usually happens in Los Angeles during the seminar, but this year we'll have our North American Cinema Awards and our Icon Award presented on Tuesday night at our cocktail reception. So looking forward to that. I think we're going to get a lot of attendance for that as well.
And a brief plug, if you're at CinemaCon now, you should be seeing issues of Boxoffice Pro floating around. We do have profiles of those NACA winners this year. They look really, I always love seeing ICTA's award winners, whether it's North America or the European folks, because it always looks so beautiful.
Yeah, and it really is a good thing to help promote our industry and those companies who are really, taking pains to do it correctly and do great things with their cinemas. It's great.
Mm-hmm. You have to take the leap at some point and don't get caught behind the curve on those premium formats.
Absolutely.
Because audiences want them.
Yeah, it's been proven. Yeah, for sure. With the changes forced by the pandemic, a lot of companies have suffered. A lot of them are coming back. People have left the industry. A lot of technology changes. We are looking to the future of the industry and trying to bring in new blood or young people into our business, not only on the technology side, but also from running a theater side. Mm-hmm. So we are piloting a mentorship program in the U.S. which has already been tested by our international ICTA branch. Bringing young people in, pairing them with mentors to kind of learn about the industry so they can get an idea if it's something they might want to consider as a career. And it's not just for young people, high school, college kids. It's for young people who maybe just started at a movie theater, behind the counter, who might want to get into the technology side. So we're really looking forward to launching this at CinemaCon. So you'll hear a lot more about that as we get closer.
Amazing. So everyone be sure to check out icta-web.com or follow on various socials to keep up to date on, I'm sure, the flurry of announcements we're all going to be seeing about CinemaCon up until it kicks off.
Yeah, I call it a crescendo, and especially when you're launching a product at CinemaCon, you kind of create a crescendo that happens to, end at the show, and it's picking up speed real quick, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, we're posting the press releases, so we know how that curve goes.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thanks so much. It's great to catch up with you, and looking forward to seeing you at CinemaCon.
Thanks, Rebecca. Look forward to seeing you and everybody else there, too. Thank you.
And a big thank you to Mark Mayfield from the ICTA for joining us on today's episode of the Box Office Podcast. Earlier, you heard from myself, my colleague Chad Kennerk, and our colleague Eric Kohn from the Southampton Playhouse. A new episode is coming up tomorrow, the final episode of our CinemaCon series. So don't forget to subscribe to make sure that's in your podcast app. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.